Alright everyone, Supreme Kami over here, so I am going to be doing some late alteration review for the standard L Strike Gundam as well as the Aegis Gundam that got an alteration of, I think, last week around. I just didn't never cover this, so since they are standard parts, so I mean there's not really like a need to cover them on the spot, so that's why I'm going to be covering it right now. So in terms of what we're looking for, simply like how good they are after alteration, because in terms of upgrading standard parts, like just alterating it, and because you do have to get them to 6-star first, then alterate it. So we just want to see, are they really that valued in terms of like, do you want to put in all the resources into it? So let's just start things off the head part over here and see what we're working with over here. So in generally, like I will not really alterate these types of parts over here, because like these head broken are generally not that good. The stat wise on this one is not really too impressive as well. This one does have mixed word tag over here, so because these came out like in a very old time slot, so that's why you would see some kind of wonky word tag combo like pro tag and mid range definitely not going to be able to work together all that well. So this one is not looking like a very good one to be alterating simply because of that. Moving on to the torso, so we do have some portrait, and let's see, does it have some redeeming factor? Because the first portrait is definitely really bad. Look at that. We have a shooting crit rate up by 30%, but the second portrait is actually giving a melee power boosted by 35%. So that is actually quite powerful, but at the end of the day, you are pretty much losing out on the first portrait that is like kind of completely useless. So that is that. You do have pro tag, which is kind of good mid range right there for that, for whatever reason that has that. So in terms of status, it is definitely supporting a very good melee build for sure. So you do have some pretty kind of sizable melee attacks, some very good melee defense, but I was about to say shot defense, but very good melee defense, so that is actually pretty good. So if you guys are liking any good option, I mean this one is not a bad candidate. This have pro tag, so that is good in a way. So moving on to the arm, so what is the stat looking like? Okay, so melee stat is not the highest in terms of the raw stat right there, but the melee defense is definitely really high at that 6k margin. That's very good. For standard having that 6k, that's actually pretty good. And then in terms of the portrait, yeah, okay. So first portrait is kind of like a whatever. So special shot attack up by 30%. So that's kind of like a rare situation. You will use like a charge attack for a melee build. So yeah. Secondary portrait, enemy cut melee cut by 35%. So this one is specifically for your melee attack going up. So this is more or less like the new way of actually implementing that. But I still have not really found out if this actually works for EXQ melee as well. I think it actually does, because the last time when I checked out, there's that one Whopper unit that I checked out that has decent portrait, and I believe the EXQ actually gains that property as well. So this one is basically like the regular portrait, but for whatever reason they want to be worded as like a cut 35% or whatever percent we're looking at. So that is kind of weird. So I mean, this one is really depending on what kind of option you guys are looking like. Protect that is good, but mid range is kind of like what's going on here. That way I would say is sufficient enough. I would think, because of that shot or that melee defense, definitely really good. Alright, moving on to the legs. So it does have EXQ, and it's gonna be like a regular rapid thrust. So I don't see too many potential for this EXQ, and prior to alteration we should be looking at a pretty good power already. So yeah, so you don't really need to alterate it in terms of using that EXQ specifically. So this one I would have to say definitely skip on it. Just the amount of resources that is invested into this, I don't think it's that much worth it. But you guys may look at the overall set, and then the overall word tag made this one be one of the ones that you want to alterate. I think that is totally fine. The word tag does support a fully melee build, so that's actually pretty good. So your chances of getting some good subslot, that is definitely high right there. In terms of melee attack and melee defense, is definitely pretty solid. Just kind of unfortunate that the overall melee raw on the like itself is just so low. Like why got a shaft like that? So that's good. So your shot attack is like, the shot and shot defense is not too bad either. If we do take a look at the other ones, I believe the shot and shot defense are pretty much around the same area for both departments. So okay, but the leg is definitely a good option if you guys are planning to use that specific ward tag, or no, those yeah, those ward tag, and then potentially get a good subset for ward tags, because this support a good melee build with those ward tag right there. So definitely not a bad option if you guys do need anything. This one is good as well. So this has some pretty nice melee defense, so that's good to see. Melee attack is continuing to lag behind compared to shot attacks. Not sure what's going on there. This one does have a Punisher strike Punisher over here, so this one definitely got a pretty good improvement, I think. Because Project Alteration, what are we looking like? Oh yeah, we're definitely getting the power out of this one. So this one, if I remember, is actually just a few melee beam, kind of like a yeet attack from like a throw shield, for example. But this one is actually shooting out melee slashes, so this could be good actually. Definitely not something to sleep on because it does have multiple hit. So your chances of, let's say your enemy has any like revive, for example, since this one does do multiple hit, it should be able to knock out if you do hit hard enough, for example, right? So it's not bad overall. So in terms of alterating it, simply the fact that if you do want to use this EX skill, you definitely do have to alterate it for that B minus power right there. And then the overall stat, I'm not gonna say it's bad for melee. It's definitely sizable if you do consider, let's say, the melee defense, and then use the conversion gear to get let's say up to 40% on top of that, so that's not too bad. All right, so moving on to the beam saber, and let's see what we have. So in terms of overall stat, you do have some pretty good chunks of, let's say, melee defense, so that will definitely get translated into some of your melee attack with that conversion gear, so not too bad. But I will have to say, in terms of the actual melee attack itself, is pretty much on the lower end tier from what we have seen lately, so that is unfortunate. So good word tag as well. So what about the portrait? Wow, so this one is actually giving out a 60% melee reduction power there, so that's actually kind of good. So this one specifically is only going to be good for anyone out there that is trying to build like a melee, just any like what enemy power reduced type build. So this is definitely something for you guys for sure. When you use an outfitter, and then when your combat power is 150,000 or that, wow, that's that's really good. So this one is definitely not a weaponry for anyone out there, but for those specific individual like myself that would like to have a let's say like a all power reduction type build, this is definitely something to use for sure. So not bad, but in terms of alternating, I don't think that is a necessary something you like. I will recommend anyone for that, just because of how niche reduction type, just anything that is like a reduction in game, just not too sufficient enough, because there's always going to be a lot more power boosting that overrides those reductions. So that's why I would say don't alterate it unless you guys are purely trying to go for those types of specific builds. So moving on to this one is going to be the Grand Slam over here. So same stats, so we don't have to talk too much about that. So this one is going to be the King's Nails over here. So this one does have a A plus B plus right here, so that's actually pretty good. So I believe prior to alteration, we should be looking at a very low stat for D power. So if you guys do want to use this EX skill, definitely something you would have to alterate to gain those falling property. But I will have to say, in terms of using this actual melee weapons as, let's say, your main slot, I don't think this is the best option, just because I feel like the sword category just doesn't really have too many supports in terms of, let's say, big scale. So this is definitely something I will not recommend. If you guys can, definitely maybe go for the beam saber, because beam saber have so many, let's say, big scale subslot property support, so that's why. All right, moving on to the beam rifle. So beam rifle does have some nice chunks of a shot attack, does have a little bit of a melee defense, so that's good to see. So what are we doing over? Ooh, okay. This one is this very sneaky option for your shooting build, I would say, because when you are using speed attribute, initial EXP charge boost by 20%, so that's always going to be good. Having those utility based supporting portraits, that's good. and then while mid-range, EXQ power boosted by 35%. So I think ideally this one is definitely something you will use in a shooting build instead of a melee build, just because this one is specifically built for mid-range. So, but this portrait, both of these are definitely top tier, not bad for sure. So if you guys are, let's say, lacking some initial charge boosting for your shooting build and you guys are running mid-range, this is definitely something you guys may consider to be running. But in terms of mid-range, I think the options of using it, like just people who uses mid-range, is a pretty, I'm not gonna say there's like a small percentage of people using it. I do see quite frequently people that use it, but in terms of mid-range, it's definitely not the most ideal word tag to be using. So, but you know, this have this in terms of this part specifically, does offer that support for sure. So not bad if you guys are using that, this have that specific builds. So moving on to the shield. So in terms of the shield, this one is continue to have those enemy power reduced right there. So this one is going to be for your shot specifically. So like I said again, if you guys are not planning to build like a enemy reduction type build, these types of specific portrait or this specific part, I will have to say is not really that good for you guys as an investment. So in terms of the overall stat wise over here, so melee attack just continue to show is left behind, but the melee defense is definitely making up. So 7k melee defense is actually pretty good. So your shot deployment wise is not that bad, so you do have some pretty good chunks of shot attack. Definitely some good shot defense as well, but in terms of this overall build, it's definitely revolving more or less like a melee build, but the stat itself is just not presenting itself as all that good. It's definitely trying to, it's good, but it's heavily relying on that melee defense and then using that change gear to get those attacks up, which is not really the best case scenario, because in terms of getting that 4-star ready for that change gear, it just takes quite a time sometimes to get that. So maybe people at best can get only up to 20% or maybe 30%. So missing that extra 10% does kind of hurt a lot. So you guys do have to be kind of be careful on which kind of parts you guys do want to alterate. But there are definitely some pretty good parts out of the L Strike edition right here. So and now let me move on to the Aegis Gundam and see what we're doing over here. So to cut things out over here, so in terms of head, I'm not going to recommend it because this one is purely going to be a waste for the EX over here, so we're going to skip that. Style wise over here is not even that bad in a way, so this one's transformer and high mobility, so head part can definitely be used for a melee build, no problem I think, but you definitely do have to find some good sub slot that has some good portrait. So that is the bottom line of using this part right here if you guys don't want to use it. But honestly, I wouldn't even recommend alterating it because of the head Vulcan. So moving on to the torso, let's see what are we dealing with over here. Okay, so the secondary portrait is definitely a redeeming factor. So you do have some EXQ reduced by 20%, so that's actually pretty good. But the first portrait definitely ruins it for sure. So what are we looking at in terms of stat? So okay, so this one is definitely showing a little bit more in terms of melee, but the melee defense is definitely not as high as you would see for the airstrike. So I don't really think the overall stat for the Aegis is going to be that high just basing on what they're trying to do here. But we do see some very good armor right there, so that's actually quite nice. Transformer and then high mobility. So transformer definitely can be a good word tag to be using because it does support melee attack as well. So you just gotta be careful on like which kind of word tag you want to build around. But there's definitely no wrong or right answer. It just whichever feels comfortable to you and which one is just easier and what you have in your box. But this one not really all that good in terms of I know it does have that cooldown trait right there, that CD reduced right there, but the first portrait is just not having it. Like you're getting like a flat damage output or a reduce right there, that's just not right, you know. So this one I will have to say you guys can definitely go for some other option in terms of your some of these EXQ CD reduce right there. So that is that. So moving on to arm, so we do have the Assault Cyclone. So this one is going to be your cousin EXQ. This one does offer a health recovery as well as shot defense up to your squad. So if this one is actually raising melee, this will be a lot more better. So I will have to say this one I wouldn't even alterate it because of the fact that this one is only pumping out shot defense, but not an actual attack modifier or a multiplier, so that's not too good in a way. But if you guys do really like the EXQ and do want to get a little bit more damage out of it, definitely go for it. No, not really stopping you, but I'm just kind of like saying, not getting any attack buffering on this one, it just kind of hurts, you know, just don't feel right. So me personally, I wouldn't alter it, but if you guys do want the S power version of the Assault Cyclone, definitely alter it at your own cost right there. So moving on to the leg, what do we have? So I didn't even take a look at the stat. Whoa, excuse me. So that stat was on this one is definitely a lot more better than L Strike already. So 95, right? Yeah, 95, and then L Strike was looking at, I think, what are we looking at? 82. Wow, that bad, really? Yikes, that is so bad. But this one doesn't have that melee defense that the L Strike would. That is gonna be the downside of it, I guess. But in terms of the change gear anyways, it's not going to be the ultimate, like, oh, it's gonna bring your melee attack by that much. So I would say at the end of the day, having that raw melee attack that high is definitely something to invest into. So this one unfortunately is not gonna come with a portrait, for example, so your subside better have some good portraits so you guys can benefit from some power boosting or just any other good portrait that you need to run. So moving on to the legs, so we do have a kick combination over here. So this one is raising melee up by 90%, so this one is actually pretty good. So I would think, you know, prior to alteration, we should be looking at maybe a D power. Yeah, so I think this one is not bad of alteration because you are getting some buff effects in there. So you guys can definitely multiply that or increase that by a lot if you guys just have some portrait that gives you those buff EXP effects up. So not too bad. Stat wise on this one is definitely better than the L Strike for sure. So 4,700 for your raw melee attack, and then carry that out by a 3,800 for your shot defense or melee defense. So that is actually good right there. So no complaints at all. But maybe the only complaint I will have is definitely going to be a Vortex, so Gundam type and Transformer. So they are continuously trying to limit how good the leg can be with those specific Vortex. So that is definitely the unfortunate factor. So yeah. Alright, moving on to the Aegis bag over here. So we do see some very good armor right there. So melee attack and melee defense is not too shabby, so that's good to see. So wow, okay. So when your armor falls below 90% or less, it reduces cooldown by 99% at once. So this one is a very unique situation that we're looking at. So you get a 90%. What are we looking at base 6? Wow. Okay. This is a very big margin, but I don't know how usable this portrait can be because you talk about below 40%. So the chances of actually getting below 40% is a very uncommon thing to be looking at. You can definitely get below that, but the chances of actually doing that is a very slim chances. So it's good that they're offering like a 90% up to max right there. But in terms of its usability and how viable it is, I don't think it is all that high. So this one definitely skip on the alteration. Alright, we want to the beam rifle and see what we have. So this one, okay. So this one is an Outrider. Okay, cool. So this one enemy shooting power reduced by 30%, and then you do get a in terms of the secondary portrait, you do get an EXQ power boost by 35% when you're using beam weaponry as attacking. So okay. So like I said again, the first portrait is definitely for someone is a pre-existing one. So and this one specifically is gonna be a shooting power reducer there. If you guys are not planning to build like a tanky build, I don't think spending your resources to alternating and then gain that power boosting is that fair of a choice. But let's say you guys don't have any other options, then you would want to alternate it. But generally speaking, I don't see too much value for players, let's say, who doesn't invest into like a reduction type build, so or like enemy reduction type build. So that's why this one it would depend on what you guys are trying to build for. So alright, last but not least, we do have the shield part over here. So this one is definitely designed to be a melee weaponry for the shield side right there. So this one is going to be getting a shield throw and then finally getting a B multiplier for the modifier for the power wise up here. So that's good. Prior to that, I believe we're only looking at a D power. Yeah. So this one, if you would alternate it, you would definitely get saved. That's pretty good. In terms of the overall stat, This one definitely falls behind in terms of the actual melee defense compared to, let's say, the L-Strike, so that is definitely something we can see the difference of. But I think overall, in terms of both these units, they are packing a lot of enemy reduction type portrait, which is kind of strange. But overall, I don't see too much of like a really standing out portrait that I would really want. The stat wise, I'm not really comparing it directly to, let's say, like step by step to some of your other, because I would feel like in terms of standard, since it's so easily accessible, it just kind of depends on what you guys have invested into the specific part and what you guys need at the moment. Because you guys can see some of those war tag are kind of wonky, so in terms of walking around though, can take some time. But with that being said, that's gonna be pretty much it in terms of the alteration review for the Aegis and then the L-Strike. So I'll catch you guys all on the next one.